Welcome back to Patrick Boyle on Finance. Today we're going to talk about antitrust laws and the two new lawsuits announced today against Facebook. We'll talk about how anti-competition law works and what's actually happening with Facebook. So today's news is that a coalition of 48 state attorneys general, led by New York's Letitia James, announced a new lawsuit against Facebook, alleging that the company stifles competition to protect its monopoly power. The lawsuit comes the same day that the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, announced a separate suit against the social media giant, also accusing it of anti-competitive practices. The state's lawsuit accuses Facebook of violating both Section 2 of the Sherman Act and multiple violations of Section 7 of the Clayton Act. The FTC is just suing under Section 2 and not Section 7. Facebook shares fell nearly 2% today because of this. Now, as I mentioned in a prior video on this topic that I'll link to in the description below, anti-competition law is both broad and vague. Thus, how and if antitrust laws are enforced has varied quite a bit over time, and enforcement does depend heavily on political will. Efforts to rein in the power of these internet platforms seems to have found support from across the political spectrum, both in the USA and abroad. So these new lawsuits are calling for penalties that include a forced breakup of Facebook. Facebook is accused of conducting a years-long course of anti-competitive conduct, which included strategically buying up rivals that threatened its monopoly power and cutting off services to squeeze rival developers. In particular, the FTC highlighted the social media companies' acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp that happened in 2012 and 2014 as designed to neutralize competition, and we did talk about that a little bit in the prior video. The state's complaint now, which I've just finished reading, is a rather persuasive piece that highlights how the Instagram and WhatsApp acquisitions were part of a broader monopoly maintenance strategy. It notes that Facebook entered the market by initially competing on privacy, but then went on to degrade privacy protections as soon as it eliminated its rivals and was secure in a monopoly position. The state's complaint notes that when seeking antitrust approval for the WhatsApp acquisition, Facebook told enforcers, including the FTC, the European regulators, WhatsApp founders, and WhatsApp customers, that it would not combine data sets or use WhatsApp data for advertising purposes. Then in 2016, they went ahead and did exactly that. It's worth noting that the European Commission fined Facebook $122 million for this deception, while the FTC did nothing. It's also worth noting that this whole episode is absent from today's FTC complaint. Now, the state's complaint does not just focus on how Facebook's drop in quality as soon as it achieved monopoly power affected Facebook users. They also point out the increase in advertising load, the huge growth of fake accounts, and how all of this feeds through in inaccurate advertising performance data and other metrics that are provided to advertisers to encourage them to advertise on the platform. Reading the state's complaint, you can see how much work has gone into it and how seriously Facebook will have to take this complaint. This isn't a small thing. The complaint describes how Facebook acquired Onavo in 2013. Onavo billed itself as a spyware VPN app that allowed users to limit apps on your device from collecting and using background data, and it was supposed to use a secure VPN network for your personal information. It also did note that it would collect the time you spend using various apps, collect mobile and Wi-Fi data that you use per app, and collect data on the websites that you visit, your location, your device, and the network type. The complaint then claims that Zuckerberg wanted to purchase Onavo in order to get an early warning system for detecting competitive threats, right? Because if you can see what apps people are starting to use, that's useful information. And they also say they did this deal to prevent competitors getting access to the valuable tools on Onavo. Now, the state complaint also discussed several other competitive threats that Facebook acquired or cut off from its APIs. This complaint presents the facts of the case in a very effective way, providing a clear picture of the systematic anti-competitive actions taken by Facebook. The FTC, while also bringing a case against Facebook, does not come out of this smelling of roses. Many of the documents that are cited in the state's complaint in order to show that the Instagram and WhatsApp purchases were illegal were available at the time that the FTC reviewed the Instagram deal. In addition, the FTC only investigated the Instagram purchase in depth, which was a $1 billion deal, and not the WhatsApp purchase, which was a $19 billion deal. Both the FTC's and the 46 states' requests include requirements that would implicate future acquisitions, with the FTC requesting a prior notice and prior approval obligation for future mergers and acquisitions, and the states aiming to prohibit Facebook from deals valued at or over $10 million without first informing the states. They're requesting that Facebook be required to submit to them any deal-related disclosures that it would make to the FTC. And this could obviously be a big deal, as 48 attorneys general would now be scrutinizing these deals, not just the FTC. Facebook, which has long denied any anti-competitive practices, told the press that they are reviewing the complaints and would provide further updates shortly. They went on to say that years after the FTC cleared our acquisitions, the government now wants a do-over with no regard for the impact that precedent would have on the broader business community or the people who choose our products every day. The lawsuits, which were both filed in U.S. federal court in Washington, D.C., marked the second significant antitrust action against a big Silicon Valley group this year, as politicians and regulators seem to be circling the tech sector. In October, the U.S. sued Google for using a web of exclusionary deals to lock out competitors in the search business. Governments today are faced with a delicate balancing act in regulating these tech giants like Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple. Combined, these tech companies make up almost a quarter of the S&P 500, and they've recently been the main engine of growth in the US stock market. You may not necessarily like the business practices of these companies, but there's a good chance that you have some of their shares in your retirement account. While neither Republicans nor Democrats appear to be delighted with Silicon Valley right now, they may not wish to over-regulate them and kill the goose that laid the golden egg. These companies are the main reason that the US stock market has outperformed in recent years. If you found this useful or interesting, don't forget to hit the like button and do subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. See you later. Bye.